Hi YouTube, I'm a very opinionated person and I just saw some movies. The first movie I saw that I'm gonna talk about was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and it was pretty good. There were some aspects of this movie that I loved, and there were some aspects that I did not like that much. Let's start with the stuff I loved. This movie has entertainment value outside of its visual effects, but it's honestly perfectly enjoyable as just a breathtaking 2.5-hour tech demo. Especially compared to 2011's Rise of the Planet of the Apes, it's really insane just to see how far computer animation has come in 13 years. This movie starts out really strong with an intriguing world and very well-directed sequences. The characters aren't super well-rounded or anything, but they're interesting enough to move the plot forward and keep your interest. The performances across the board are pretty good, especially those of the motion capture ape performers. However, this movie doesn't flesh out any of its most interesting ideas, and it really doesn't even seem like it's interested in fleshing them out in a sequel. It really feels more like a blockbuster movie that wants to feel much deeper and more thought-provoking than it actually is. And that's especially apparent in the second half of the movie, because the writing kinda just takes a nosedive after a twist that I won't spoil. The movie continues being perfectly entertaining, especially in terms of the visual effects, as I mentioned, but all of that intrigue and well-built world is just gone. The ending action sequence in particular is fun and very well executed on a technical level, but a lot of the sequence of events within the action is just mindless nonsense. This movie is also like a half hour too long. I was really ready for it to end, and that sequel bait, I don't know. This movie is good, and I don't want this review to seem overly negatively toned, because I did enjoy this movie, and I would recommend you all go see it. That said, it is nowhere near as good as it could be, and if you are someone who has not seen the Caesar trilogy, whilst those movies are still flawed in many ways, I would infinitely recommend them over this movie, particularly Dawn. And I'm giving this one 3 stars, 6 out of 10. The other movie I saw that I'm going to talk about is Furiosa, and this one was pretty great. The visuals and art direction in this movie are nothing short of stunning. The performances across the board are pretty good. Chris Hemsworth is very campy and fun in his role, and Anya Taylor-Joy does a lot with very little dialogue. The camera work and score are both incredible. Honestly, all of the technical aspects are basically perfect, with the exception of, like, a little shoddy CGI here and there. The sound design, too, is really good, especially if you go and see it in Dolby like I did, which I would honestly really recommend. The action sequences especially are so well executed, and probably the most cinematic and best to watch in a theater that I've seen so far this year. The world of Mad Max is really interesting, especially given that this was my first Mad Max movie. A lot of the world building does kind of fall apart when you think about it too much, but unlike Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which I just gave a similar criticism, the world of Mad Max is so interesting and campy and takes itself so much less seriously in a way that enables me to cut it just way more slack. For the most part, it's also very well paced. It commanded my attention the whole time, and I was never bored. It's not perfect. The first 30 to 40 minutes of the movie don't feature Anya Taylor-Joy and feature a child version of Furiosa. And like, the child actor is serviceable, but their performance does leave a bit to be desired. Honestly, my biggest complaint about this movie is that it is a movie. I think it would have worked a lot better as a TV show or a miniseries. There's lots of cool characters and ideas that are given kind of enough screen time, but I just wish that they each could have had an extra 10 to 15 minutes to really just properly flesh it out. That honestly would add like a point or two to the score, even if this movie like just did that and was a 3-hour version of itself. But it's hard enough to profit off of an R-rated blockbuster that isn't directed by Christopher Nolan as it is, so I can understand why they didn't want to go that route for this. It's already like 2.5 hours long. But yeah, this movie is pretty great. I rather enjoyed it. I would recommend both of the movies I talked about in this video, but if you only can see one of them, I would recommend Furiosa, and I'm giving it a high 3.5, low 4 stars, like a 7 or an 8. I can't really decide. Maybe it needs to sit with me more. It's definitely not a 6. It's definitely not a 9. It's somewhere in the 7-8 range. It's very good. You should go watch it.